Amara Taylor didn't like mirrors. They always felt like liars, shiny, unforgiving things that made you choose a side. Some mornings, when she stared into the bathroom mirror, she saw her mom's eyes staring back. Warm, almond-shaped, always a little tired, like they held more stories than anyone knew. Other times, it was her dad's nose and jawline, sharp and defined, unmistakably his. But most days, Amara just saw a girl who didn't fully fit anywhere. Her skin was the color of warm sand. Her hair? A tangled mess of curls she hadn't figured out how to love yet. At school, the black girls said she talked too white. The white girls said her hair was so cool, in that tone that wasn't quite mean, but definitely not kind. Boys didn't flirt. Teachers praised her essays but always raised their eyebrows when she wrote about both soul food and Shakespeare in the same paragraph. She was 14 and already exhausted. At home, it was better. Her parents didn't make her choose. Her mom, who was black and grew up in Atlanta, would hum old gospel songs while frying okra. Her dad, white with Irish roots, played Joni Mitchell on Saturday mornings and made buttermilk pancakes from scratch. They met in grad school over a shared love of poetry, and sometimes they still danced in the kitchen like the world hadn't hardened around them yet. But school was different. Outside those four walls, Amara was always half too much or half not enough. On this particular Tuesday, she sat in the back row of English class, chewing on her pencil, pretending to take notes. Her teacher, Mr. Peters, was explaining metaphor and symbolism, but Amara already knew all that. She loved words. Words made more sense than people did. Her spiral notebook was half filled with poems she never showed anyone. Poems about being in between, about freckles that looked like constellations and skin that people couldn't decide how to categorize. Amara, Mr. Peters' voice interrupted her thoughts. She blinked. Sorry. He smiled kindly. Do you have an example of metaphor? She felt the usual heat rise to her cheeks. Everyone was looking now. She cleared her throat. A metaphor is like saying I'm a bridge, connecting two places that don't speak the same language. The room was silent for a beat. Then a boy in the front row muttered, "What does that even mean?" Laughter rippled through the classroom. Amara sank lower into her seat. Mr. Peters raised an eyebrow but moved on. Back in her notebook, Amara scribbled a new line. Maybe I'm not a bridge. Maybe I'm an island, with too much sea between me and everyone else. She pressed her lips together, fighting the lump rising in her throat. If only someone could read what was really inside her, underneath the freckles and the silence and the tired half-smiles. If only someone could see her whole. But for now, she stayed quiet, and the mirror kept lying. Saturday mornings were sacred in the Taylor household. At least they were supposed to be. Sit still, Amara, her mom said, fingers working gently through the tangles in her daughter's hair. These curls have a mind of their own today. I think they're rebelling, Amara muttered, squinting at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her mom stood behind her, sectioning off hair with confident fingers and decades of experience. The scent of coconut oil filled the room, sweet, warm, nostalgic. I like your hair like this, her mom said, smiling. It's you. Yeah, but nobody else does, Amara mumbled. Her mom paused. What does that mean? Amara shrugged. It means I get called mop head and mixed chick, and people always want to touch it like I'm some kind of petting zoo. Her mom sighed deeply, like she had been waiting for this conversation and dreading it all at once. Baby girl, your hair is not a problem to fix. It's a crown, and not everyone will know how to treat a queen. That's the thing, Amara said quietly. I don't feel like a queen. I feel like a mistake. Her mom's hands stilled. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The quiet wrapped around them like a blanket stitched with invisible threads. Pain, memory, love. You're not a mistake, Amara, she said finally. You're the answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was praying. You are both fire and rain. You are rhythm and reason. You carry generations in your skin, your hair, your heart. Amara blinked back tears, not sure how to hold all that truth. It felt heavy and light all at once. After her mom finished detangling and braiding, Amara went up to her room and collapsed onto the bed. The sun streamed through the window, catching the edges of her journal as she flipped it open. She wrote, "Today my mom called my hair a crown, but I don't feel royal. I feel like I'm still learning my own language, one that's written in curls and questions." The next morning at church, an older woman with silver locks pulled Amara aside. "You're the Taylor girl," she said. "You've got that spark in you. You know what I mean?" Amara didn't know, but she nodded anyway. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit into other people's definitions. Maybe it was time to build her own. Cafeteria politics were brutal. Every school had its unspoken codes. Where to sit, who not to sit with, how to laugh without trying too hard. For Amara, the lunchroom was like a map drawn in invisible ink. She was never quite sure where she belonged. She used to sit with the girls from her old dance class. But somewhere around 7th grade, they all started straightening their hair and talking about who they liked on TikTok, and Amara started showing up with books about Zora Neale Hurston and notebooks full of unfinished poetry. They didn't say she couldn't sit with them. They just stopped saving her a seat. So now, she sat at what she'd secretly nicknamed the outsider table. It wasn't official, but everyone knew. That corner table by the vending machines? That was where you'd find the weird, the quiet, the too much, and the not enoughs. A girl who sketched anime characters on her jeans. A boy who never made eye contact, but could quote every line of The Matrix. And Amara, too black for the white girls, too white for the black ones, and too bookish to pretend she didn't care. Today, though, something was different. A new girl was sitting at the table. Pale skin, thick glasses, bold red lipstick. She wore a t-shirt that said, "Question everything" in glitchy font, and a flannel tied around her waist like a nod to some grungy past. She looked like someone who didn't ask for permission. She looked up as Amara approached. "Hey, you always sit here." Amara paused, unsure. "Yeah, you just moved here. I'm Lila." She extended a hand like they were business partners instead of two misfit teens in a middle school cafeteria. "Amara." She shook her hand, surprised by the firm grip. Lila looked at the table like she was surveying territory. "Is this the no one cares if you eat your lunch in silence zone?" "Basically," Amara said. Then, almost without meaning to, "But sometimes we talk about weird stuff." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Define weird." Amara hesitated. "Like, last week I was thinking about how being biracial feels like living with subtitles no one else can read." Lila blinked. "That's not weird. That's kind of brilliant." Amara's heart skipped. No one had ever called her thoughts brilliant before. Not a peer, anyway. Lila leaned in. "Okay, so tell me more. Subtitles, huh?" And just like that, something shifted. Not all at once. Not magically. But the space around her felt a little less lonely. Maybe the outsider table wasn't a punishment after all. Maybe it was the beginning of something. The hallway was unusually loud after third period. Amara had just closed her locker when she saw them. 3 kids from her English class, huddled around a phone and laughing too hard. She wouldn't have thought anything of it, but when she walked past, one of them whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Hey, look, there's the confused one." "Pick a side, Amara." Laughter. Not just theirs, others joined in. The hallway got colder somehow, even as the air stayed still. She froze, fingers tightening around her backpack strap. The boy with the phone, Josh, a loudmouth who always made borderline comments in class, didn't even flinch when their eyes met. "Relax," he said. "It's just a joke." Amara stared at him for a beat, her throat dry. Right, a joke. But the crack had already formed. She didn't need to see the screen to guess what had happened. Maybe a screenshot from her Instagram, her most recent post, a selfie with her curls out, captioned "mixed, not confused." Or maybe it was from last week's philosophy club meeting, when she'd made an offhand comment about growing up with 2 cultures and sometimes feeling like she had none. The post had gotten more likes than usual. But now it felt like she'd been tricked into giving the world a weapon. When she got home that afternoon, she went straight to her room and shut the door. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Not because her features were unfamiliar, but because her expression was. Anger, shame, confusion, they all danced across her face in turns. Her mother had told her once that mirrors don't lie. But Amara was starting to think they didn't tell the full truth either. Her phone buzzed. Lila. Hey, you okay? I saw what happened today. Amara didn't reply right away. She sat down, opened her journal, and stared at a blank page. Then she wrote, Today I became someone else's punchline. I always knew I didn't fit cleanly into a box, but I didn't expect people to laugh while trying to shove me in one. She closed the journal. She didn't cry. Later that evening, she found a note slipped into her locker. It was handwritten, scribbled in blue ink. They laugh because they don't know what it means to be both thunder and sunlight. But you do. Don't shrink. No name. No explanation. Just words raw and anonymous, but somehow exactly what she needed. The mirror still showed cracks. But Amara began to understand. Maybe being whole didn't mean being unbroken. Maybe it meant shining through the broken parts anyway. Saturday mornings used to mean cartoons and cereal. But lately, they had taken on a different rhythm. That weekend, Amara found herself at the kitchen table surrounded by fabrics, old photo albums, and the smell of burning sage. Her mother, Grace, stood by the stove making Amara, deep-fried bean cakes she hadn't cooked in months. Her father, Derek, was flipping through records, letting the sounds of John Coltrane and Fela Kuti float between the walls like ghosts of defiance and memory. You used to love this one, Grace said, holding up a faded photo of Amara at 6 years old, her tiny head wrapped in a vibrant gelly. Amara smiled. I looked like a queen. You were, her mom said. You still are. Derek sat down beside them. You know, when I met your mom, I didn't understand a thing about Nigeria. I didn't know jollof from gumbo. But I listened. I learned. And I loved. Amara looked between them. 2 cultures. 2 rhythms. 2 lives that somehow created one. Hers. And yet, the world never seemed to let her forget the difference. Some days, she was too black for her white classmates. Other days, not black enough for her black peers. Exotic, some called her. Confused, others insisted. But sitting in that kitchen, wrapped in the sounds and smells of both her parents' worlds, she didn't feel confused. She felt layered. I want to learn more, Amara said suddenly. About Nigeria. About you, Mom. About where I come from. Grace's eyes softened. Then let's start today. They opened albums, told stories. How Grace had braided hair for her sisters under mango trees. How Derek marched in college protests and kept Maya Angelou quotes taped to his dorm wall. They played music that moved through generations, and Amara found herself dancing barefoot on the cold tile, her laugh blending with her parents until the whole house felt like a heartbeat. Later that day, Amara returned to her room and rewrote her Instagram bio. Before, mixed, not confused. Now, daughter of roots, student of resistance, both and proud. She didn't care if Josh saw it, or if people laughed again. She was learning that reclaiming your identity doesn't require permission. It requires courage. That night, Lila texted, That post is like fire. You're owning it. I'm proud of you. Amara replied, still figuring it out. But at least now, I'm doing it on purpose. For the first time in a while, Amara didn't feel like she was floating between 2 worlds. She felt like she was building her own. It happened on a Wednesday. Amara was sitting at her desk in 3rd period English, doodling spirals on the margins of her notebook while Mr. Kearns lectured on Lord of the Flies. The lesson blurred in her ears, something about power, civilization, the masks we wear. She almost laughed. Masks. She'd worn them her whole life. She was still lost in thought when she heard the snickering. At first, she didn't look up. She was used to whispers. Then came the word that snapped her out of her daydream like a slap. Half-breed. The voice was sharp, cutting through the air like glass. It came from the back of the class, and though no one openly laughed, the silence that followed was just as loud. Amara didn't flinch outwardly. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She just closed her notebook, stood up, and walked out of the classroom without a word. Outside, the hallway was too quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzing like insects. She headed straight to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, her breath shallow, fists clenched. She wasn't angry at the boy. Not really. She was angry at herself, for still letting it get to her. For pretending it didn't hurt. Because it did. But then something new began to rise, something she didn't expect. Not tears. Not shame. But fire. She remembered the story her father had told her just days ago. How his grandfather had once stood his ground at a segregated lunch counter in Mississippi. How her mom had been told to speak English at a department store in New York even though her English was flawless. And how neither of them had let the small minds of others shrink their sense of worth. She looked at herself in the mirror now. Eyes rimmed red, sure, but burning. Her reflection didn't look broken. It looked clear. At lunch, Lila found her sitting alone beneath a tree, headphones in, scribbling furiously into a leather-bound journal. "You okay?" Lila asked gently. Amara looked up. "No, but I'm going to be." She handed Lila the journal, open to the latest page. Scrawled in black ink, unfiltered and raw, were the words. "I'm not too much. I'm not in between. I'm exactly enough. Whole. Holy. Here." Lila read it twice. "You wrote this?" "Yeah. Just now. After what happened in class." Lila sat down beside her, silent for a moment. "That's fire. Like, actual soul-on-paper fire." Amara didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed. "I think I'm done hiding. I'm tired of whispering when I was born to speak." That night, Amara posted the poem to her Instagram with a caption. "To the boy who called me a half-breed today, thank you for reminding me that I'm not half of anything. I'm full. I'm fierce. I'm healing. And I'm not alone. Hashtag biracial and brilliant, hashtag whole not half, hashtag unmute me." The post exploded. Messages poured in, some from classmates, some from strangers. "I felt like that my whole life. Thank you for saying it out loud. You just put into words everything I didn't know how to say. Keep speaking. We need your voice." That was the night Amara realized the power of the quiet fire inside her. The same fire that had made her question, doubt, hide, was now the one lighting the path forward. She couldn't control what the world said about her, but she could choose how she responded. Not with silence, with strength, with softness, with her story. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't yell back. It's to speak truth, calmly and clearly, in a world that tries to shut you up. It was the beginning of something bigger. And Amara wasn't walking away from the fire anymore. She was walking straight into it. Amara didn't sleep much that night. She'd thought that speaking out would feel like closure, like a weight lifted. But it was more like a door had opened. And now she couldn't stop hearing the echoes of others walking through it. Her phone buzzed constantly. DMs came in from people she didn't even know. Kids in other states, even other countries, who'd found her poem and saw themselves in it. One message stood out. "I used to hide my mixed identity. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. But your words made me feel seen. Thank you for being brave first." She read it 3 times. Then she whispered it out loud. "Thank you for being brave first." It stuck with her. That Friday, the school hosted its annual Diversity Week assembly. Normally, it was a routine lineup of flag-waving performances and awkwardly read bios about cultural icons. But this year, something changed. Ms. Ray, the assistant principal and one of the few Black staff members at the school, emailed Amara personally. "I saw your post. I felt it. Would you consider reading that poem at the assembly?" Amara hesitated. She wasn't a performer. She'd never read anything publicly before. Her voice shook in front of 3 people, let alone a gym full of classmates and teachers. But something in her heart tugged. Hard. She remembered how alone she'd felt just days ago in that bathroom. She remembered how one moment of courage had given a voice to others. She said yes. The day of the assembly, the gym buzzed with laughter, chatter, sneakers squeaking against polished floors. She could feel the thud of bass from the dance group that had just performed, and the smell of cafeteria pizza lingering in the air. She was standing backstage, knees locked, palms clammy. Her journal felt heavier than usual in her hands. Then Ms. Ray leaned in. Don't speak for approval. Speak for connection. You're not performing. You're reminding them they're not alone. That unlocked something. When her name was called, Amara stepped out into the light. The noise didn't fade, but it softened, as if the room could feel the change in air. She took the mic, breathed in, and spoke. I'm not too much. I'm not in between. I'm exactly enough. Whole. Holy. Here. It wasn't just her words that moved the room. It was her calm, her clarity, her refusal to apologize for taking up space. When she finished, there was silence, not from indifference, but from resonance. Then slowly the applause started. And it didn't stop. She stepped off stage trembling, but lighter, like she'd just exhaled years of holding back. What she didn't expect was what happened next. 3 other students found her before the end of the day, quiet kids she barely knew. One was a biracial boy who always kept to himself in science class. Your poem, he said, eyes watery. It's like you wrote it from my heart. Another, a girl who wore a hijab, leaned in and whispered, thank you. We all needed that. And the third was Lila, of course. She grabbed Amara's hand in the hallway and whispered, you didn't just find your voice. You gave us permission to find ours. That night, Amara sat on her porch again, this time with her journal open and a fresh page ready. She thought of all the people who had once tried to make her feel small. Not just classmates or strangers, but even the little voices in her own head. She smiled and began to write. I used to think silence was safer. But now I know. Speaking my truth doesn't make me loud. It makes me free. She titled it, Unmuted. It would be her next post. Maybe even the start of something more. A blog. A series. A space where kids like her, biracial, in between, brilliant, could come to feel seen, to speak, to be. Amara didn't know where it would go. But for the first time, that didn't scare her. It thrilled her. Because she wasn't just unlocking her voice anymore. She was unlocking a movement. The weekend after the assembly, Amara did something she hadn't done in a while. She let herself be still. No social media scrolling. No studying. No writing. Just breathing. Her mom noticed it first. You seem lighter, she said, walking into Amara's room with a bowl of mango slices. Like something's shifted. Amara smiled, her legs curled under a throw blanket. I think I finally stopped trying to be someone and just let myself be. Her mom nodded, eyes soft. You've always been someone. It just took the world a little while to catch up. They shared the mangoes in silence, the kind that feels like conversation without words. And Amara thought, maybe that was what she'd been chasing all along. Not attention, not applause, but peace. And yet, peace wasn't the same as easy. Monday morning came, and with it, a strange tension. The kind that follows visibility. Some people looked at her differently now, like she'd grown 10 feet tall overnight. Others didn't look at all. In the hallway, a boy muttered, Here comes Maya Angelou 2.0, with a laugh that wasn't entirely cruel, but wasn't kind either. And in history class, when they discussed the civil rights movement, Mr. Dawson asked Amara, pointedly, if she wanted to share her perspective as someone with such a unique heritage. She blinked. I'm still learning too, she said, voice steady but cool. Black history isn't just mine to explain, it's all of ours to learn. After class, Lila caught up with her. You good? Amara gave her a tired smile. Yeah, just navigating the space between being invisible and being everyone's go-to spokesperson for race now. Lila nodded. It's like being seen comes with a spotlight and a target. Exactly. That night, Amara opened her journal again. Not to write another poem, but to think out loud. What do you do when the world wants you to be either this or that, but your soul is both? What do you do when people keep asking, which side are you? And all you want to say is, mine. She stared at the page. Something clicked. Her story wasn't about fitting in. It was about bridging. She thought about her dad's family, Puerto Rican, loud, passionate, full of salsa music and storytelling. Then about her mom's side, Black Southern roots, soul food, gospel, strength carved from generations of resilience. She belonged to both. And the space between, that wasn't a gap. It was a bridge. The next day at school, Amara asked Ms. Ray if she could start a new group, a gathering for students navigating multiple identities. She called it the space between. It wasn't exclusive to mixed kids, just a safe spot for anyone who felt in between in some way. Racially, culturally, religiously, even emotionally. To her surprise, the first meeting filled up fast. A Korean adoptee who'd always felt disconnected from her heritage. A white student with two moms who felt caught between acceptance and misunderstanding. A kid whose parents were from two different countries and spoke three different languages at home. They sat in a circle. No stage. No mic. Just presence. Amara opened with a quote she'd scribbled the night before. Being in between doesn't mean being nowhere. It means being everywhere. Holding pieces of many truths. And shaping a whole that only you can carry. They talked. Listened. Laughed. Cried. And for the first time, Amara didn't just feel like she had a voice. She felt like she was creating space for others to find theirs. Later that week, she walked home past the mural downtown, the one she used to avoid because it felt too loud, too bold. But now she saw it differently. It was a swirl of colors, colliding, blending, brilliant, just like her. She took a photo of it and posted it with a new caption. In a world obsessed with categories, I choose color. In a world chasing certainty, I choose curiosity. I am the space between. And that space, it's sacred. It started with a message, then 5 more, then a flood. Hey, I saw your post about the space between. Can anyone come? My cousin in another school needs this. Do you guys do meetups? Your speech, it made me feel like I wasn't broken for not fitting in. Amara stared at her phone in awe. Notifications lit up one after another, not with likes, but with lives. Names she didn't recognize. Stories she hadn't heard. Students from nearby schools, kids from youth groups, even a local college freshman who said, "You're doing what I wish someone had done when I was your age." It wasn't about the spotlight anymore. This was an echo. And echoes, she realized, meant the truth was bouncing, reaching others, circling back, reshaping her too. She screenshotted one message from a student named Jaden. I'm mixed Black and Arab. My dad left when I was young, and I never felt like I belonged in either world. I used to hate my reflection. Your group gave me language for what I've always felt. Thank you. Amara read it 3 times, tears burning. She'd spent years fighting the mirror, blaming her nose, her curls, her weird voice, the way she couldn't code switch fast enough or translate her mom's comfort into her dad's tongue. Now she saw. Every so-called flaw was actually a piece of someone else's map. A road to belonging. At the next space between meeting, she shared Jaden's message, with his permission. This, she said, holding her phone up like a torch, is why we show up. Not because we have answers, but because someone else might need to hear our questions out loud. They nodded, some misty-eyed, others fiercely focused. Even the quietest girl in the group, Lonnie, who never spoke unless called on, raised her hand. I used to think I was broken, she said softly. Like my anxiety made me too fragile to be real. But hearing you talk about the space between, I think maybe that's where I am. And maybe it's okay. Amara's throat tightened. It is, she whispered. It absolutely is. Later that week, Ms. Ray pulled her aside. You're being nominated for the district's Rising Voice Award. Amara blinked. Wait, what? It's for students who've sparked real change. The committee saw a clip from your speech and heard about the group. They want to feature you in a youth leadership summit. Amara laughed, part shock, part disbelief. Me? I'm not. I'm not polished. I still mess up. I still cry over stuff I shouldn't. Ms. Ray smiled. Exactly. That's why it matters. You didn't wait to be perfect to show up. You let your cracks shine. And through them, the light came in. That night, Amara stood at her window, journal in hand. The town stretched below her, street lamps flickering like stars on earth. She wrote, "Maybe we spend too long looking for the version of ourselves that fits some mold. But what if the mold was never made for us? Maybe the echoes we leave behind, the ones made from pain and joy and questions, those are the real answers. Not perfect ones, but human ones." She tucked the journal under her pillow and smiled into the dark. At school the next day, Lila met her at the lockers. "Guess what?" she said, holding up her phone. "I wrote that piece on identity you told me to write, and it's getting published in the youth column." Amara grinned. "See, you just had to stop waiting to be ready. And start writing like I already mattered," Lila finished, bumping her shoulder. "You do." And in that moment, among hallways that once echoed with doubt, Amara felt it fully. Her story was no longer just hers. It was becoming a door, and the more she opened it, the more others walked through. Amara stood in front of her mirror, one hand smoothing the front of her blazer, the other hovering just beneath her chin. Her curls were wild today, defiant in the spring humidity. She almost reached for a tie-down scarf, but paused. She looked at herself the way she used to look at strangers, studying for fault lines, cataloging flaws. But today something had shifted. She wasn't looking for what was wrong. She was finally seeing what was real. The girl in the mirror had her mother's jaw, her father's brows. She had skin like toasted caramel that never quite matched foundation brands and eyes that held both softness and fire. She had scars, emotional and physical, that no longer whispered shame but story. She smiled. Then she turned to face her bedroom, where the award from the Rising Voice Summit sat on her desk, next to her latest article, now published in a teen literary journal. She hadn't imagined she'd get this far. And honestly, she hadn't done it alone. Lila was waiting downstairs, wearing earrings shaped like question marks and holding a notebook full of new spoken-word drafts. Ms. Ray had texted earlier that morning. "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Knock 'em dead today." And then there was Jaden, who was traveling in from 2 towns over to speak at the first ever Space Between Youth conference. That's what today was, a full-circle moment she never expected. It had started as a tiny group with folding chairs and stale vending machine snacks. Now it was a real event, co-sponsored by the district's diversity initiative, with breakout sessions, a keynote, even a panel on healing generational identity trauma. And she was the opening speaker. The auditorium buzzed as Amara stepped onto the stage. Rows of students, teachers, parents, and a few local leaders stared back. A sea of faces, some skeptical, some expectant, all listening. She took a deep breath. "Hi," she began, voice steady. "My name is Amara. I'm biracial. I'm bilingual, but not fluent. I'm brilliant some days, anxious on others. I felt too white for some spaces, too black for others, too soft, too loud, too much, too invisible." A pause. "But today, I'm not here to apologize for any of that." A murmur moved through the crowd. "I'm here to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You are not broken. You are becoming." Somewhere in the middle rows, Lila wiped her eyes. Jaden nodded silently, arms crossed over his chest. When we grow up feeling like we don't fit, we start to think the problem is us. We try to sand down our edges, hide our culture, laugh at jokes that hurt us, straighten what curls, quiet what burns. She looked around the room, locking eyes with a girl in the front row wearing a hoodie that read "Mixed and Mighty." But what if the parts we were taught to hide are the very parts that hold our power? The crowd leaned in. "Flaws. That's what they call them, right? But what is a flaw? Something that doesn't meet a certain standard? Whose standard? Whose mold? If the mold wasn't made for us, maybe we weren't meant to shrink to fit it. Maybe we were made to reshape it. She clicked the remote in her hand, and the projector behind her lit up with images. Moments from their group, kids laughing, journaling, debating over pizza, hugging after tough conversations. This is the space between. A group of students who stopped trying to belong by erasing themselves and started building a space where they could be. Thunderous applause broke out. And still, Amara wasn't done. Everyone in this room carries something heavy. Identity is complicated. Pain is real. Healing is messy. But I believe every one of us, especially those of us who were told we were too different to lead, have the power to light the way for others. She stepped away from the podium, holding the mic now with both hands. I used to hate the mirror. Now I use it, not to criticize, but to remember. The girl I see is still growing. And her flame? It doesn't have to burn anyone down to shine. It just has to be seen. Silence. Then, like a rising tide, cheers, claps, even a few standing. Backstage, Ms. Ray embraced her like a daughter. I told you the world would catch up to your voice. No, Amara said softly. I think I just finally stopped waiting for permission to use it. Lila bounded over, squealing. You slayed. Like, ugly cry, throat lump level slayed. Amara laughed. You're gonna make me cry before panel time. Outside, the hallway filled with conversations sparked by her words. A student from another city said she wanted to start a space between at her school. Parents thanked her. Teachers asked to connect. And as the sun set behind the auditorium's glass panels, Amara stood alone for a moment, watching her reflection again. This time not in a mirror, but in a window full of light. She thought about her younger self, afraid to speak. Trying so hard to pick a side. To be enough of anything. She whispered as if to that girl. You never needed to change to be seen. You just needed to see yourself first. And in that moment, her flame wasn't just a light. It was a beacon. A reminder that the space between isn't a gap to fear. It's a bridge. 5 years later, Amara stood at the edge of a small stage. This time, in a sunlit community center on the south side of Chicago. The folding chairs were still there, some newer, most borrowed. The snacks were better, the lighting brighter, but the spirit? Still the same. A new circle of young faces sat waiting. Middle schoolers, high schoolers, a few college mentors. They were mixed. First-gen neurodivergent. Biracial. They were everything the world didn't always know how to name, and everything it needed. Okay, Amara said, smiling as she took her seat among them. Let's start where we always do. Not with answers. With the questions you're scared to ask. A boy in the front fiddled with his sleeves. What if I don't know who I am yet? Amara nodded slowly, like it was the most sacred thing he could have said. Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Behind her on the wall was a mural, hand-painted by students from years past. At the center was a figure reaching upward, half shadow, half light, surrounded by words. You are not broken. You are becoming. Amara no longer needed stages or microphones to feel powerful. Her voice lived in the programs she built, the students she mentored, the books she was writing. Each one a thread in a larger story of healing. She still had hard days. Still wrestled with doubt. But she no longer fought her reflection. She had made peace with her in-betweenness. And in doing so, she helped others find peace in theirs. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Inside, one flame had lit 100 more. And Amara knew. She wasn't the whole fire. But she was part of it. And that was more than enough.